everybody, welcome back. Now if you are like me, you like to do creative stuff for no good reason whatsoever, then this is the video for you. In this video I will teach you how I sew, design and make my own clothing. Welcome aboard the studio. Yes, hello everybody, and let's get started. The first task, as always in my videos, is to do some very important sketches, just to jolt the brain into action and to make sure that you explore every possibility. This part of the process should always be quick and easy, as to make sure to overproduce ideas and to then filter. And for this project, I knew I wanted a design with a patchwork ombre effect, kind of a thing, with two colors of fabric, with a lighter color on the top and a dark at the bottom. What colors it would be, I don't know yet. And the red and blue here are just placeholders. I should be changing later, as you can see. And to design the patchwork, I made a couple of base shapes and started manipulating them into some sort of pattern. I was glad in this case that I decided to use only two colors, since this is the first patchwork I have ever made, and yeah, I'm actually quite happy with the result. This would also be the most complicated textile project that I have ever made, so this would be a necessity. And these are my final patchwork options. I thought the left one was a little bit neater, so I picked that one for this project. For best success, start with a cheap pattern. Note cheap, not good. If I damage this pattern, I really won't be too sad. I can just buy another one. Now, I knew I needed to make at least one mock-up for this project, because I have never made a coat before. And quite frankly, the best mock-up material is always old bed sheets. Ta-da! First mock-up done. Now with the first mock-up done, I can now start marking out all the changes that I need. For this purpose, a friend is good to have, especially if he owns his own fabric store. Also, while you are there, you can pick up some fabric samples. I settled on a combination of green top fabric and black bottom fabric with red lining and trim, because that's what the store had in. Actually, if he had red and blue, I would have taken it. From these changes, you can start to make the next to final pattern. I used some present wrapping paper, since that is what I had laying around for this purpose. In order to make the currently non-existent hood, I measured both from the shoulders over the head, the circumference on my head and add some extra, and finally the neck width of the already finished mock-up. I don't know if this is a good way of doing it, but I did it anyway. After cutting out the new pattern pieces, this will be the best moment to calculate the amount of fabric you will need for your final product. To do this, just lay down the pieces on the floor and start measuring. In this case, I needed 2 meters of green linen, 1.5 meters of black linen, 1.5 meters of red linen, which was a little too much, I have to admit, 3 meters of lining, 25 centimeters of interface, and 5 meters of padded interface. Yay, my mostly finished design! Now, I still needed to modify the hood, and there were a couple of changes that I needed to make as well. So with all that in mind, here is the final pattern. The front piece was extended by 30 centimeters at the bottom, the zip line was modified and markings for the patchwork was added. Also, the shoulders were cut and would receive a piece of different colored fabric later on. The back piece was also extended by 30 centimeters and the yoke line was modified for the new yoke. The yoke got extended at the bottom and was modified to add a couple of folds that would give the shoulders better movement. The sleeves were left unchanged. The inner front facing piece was modified to match the front piece. The neck inner facing was left unchanged, and so was also the pocket pieces. The front and back lining pieces were simply extended by 30 centimeters at the bottom, but the lining sleeves got a little more fabric at the shoulder back seam. And last but not least, the sleeve ribs stayed the same, but the neck rib got completely replaced by the new hood. All pieces had 1 centimeter of seam allowance added by the manufacturer. Before you start sewing, make sure you wash and steam all your fabric before use in order to prevent shrinkage in the end product. patchwork, I started by giving the fabric a straight edge and, in my case, start cutting 7 cm wide strips. I gave the strips a quick press and sewed both of the long sides together. When the strips were ready, I started cutting out the triangles. I cut the strips at a 45-degree angle at the seams and alternated the angle every time. The triangle pass got a quick press to make it easy for myself later on. I also cut off the dog ears in the corners to reduce bulk. When sewing your pieces together, it is a smart thing to lay them out in the pattern you decided upon. In my case, I sew with a 1 cm seam allowance. I made strips of all these pieces once again, and I could then sew these strips together into one big patchwork. I ensure to open up all the seams with an iron to reduce bulk. And this is the result of the patchwork, and yes, I am quite happy with myself for a first try. Finally, I could start cutting out the fabric for the jacket. Pro tip, use rulers to get straight lines if you, like me, don't have enough table space. Also, a rolling cutter and cutting mat is a great benefit to this process. Remember to cut every marking out to where specified. For the front and back pieces, the patchwork needed to be added. I pinned the pieces together and sewed with a 1 cm seam allowance. I then pressed the pieces and cut off the excess fabric. After this, I added all the interfacing material and padding. For the front piece, I then added some cording. Luckily, I found this cording foot in my feet collection that made the job a lot easier. If you don't have a cording foot, a zipper foot can also do the job. Now, any padded fabric needs to be quilted in order to not fall apart. I wanted to make some freehand quilting, but after I realized that I suck at this, I just made some nice straight lines 5 cm apart. To quilt the patchwork, I used this edge joining foot to make it easy for myself to sew in the middle of the seam. Remember to continuously trim all the stray threads throughout the process. From this point forward, I just followed the pattern I specified, which is one of the benefits of a store-bought pattern. You don't have to think as much. The yoke had its new folds added and was then sewn to the top of the back piece. I then top stitched the seams with this edge following foot. I used this foot for all top stitching everywhere specified for the rest of the project. The shoulder patches were corded and sewn to the top of the front piece. And now for the pockets. I marked out the placement of the pockets on all the affected pieces. I gave all the pocket pieces a quick press and then serged or zigzagged all the edges of the fabric to avoid fraying. I used this serge stitch and a serging foot on my machine for a prettier result. I only did this because I could. Zigzag is otherwise plenty. The pocket trim is added to the top of the pouch pieces to add stability. I had decided beforehand that I didn't want the pockets to have a zipper like in the pattern. Instead I wanted a nice flap that I added some cording and interface to. The pocket seams were then marked. The flap and some extra trim strips were sewn onto the pocket pouches. I laid the pockets upside down on the front piece and then sewed the seam at the top of the pocket hole. The pocket could then be opened and the pocket pouch was then turned inward. It all then got a quick press. I then top stitched around the hole in order to give it all stability. The pocket pouch could then be closed. To give the content of the pocket some security, I then added a closing rivet to the flap. Now for the hood. The hood followed pretty much the same path as all the other pieces. The only difference was that it got its lining first. I cut, pressed and padded everything together, after which the string path was folded and pressed in place. Remember to add angles for the string holes before sewing anything together. I then sewed the top seam together and top stitched. I then did the same for the lining. The lining was then added to the front edge and stitched together. The string path could now be sewn. I found the lining in the back of the hood to be a little too loose, so I hand stitched it in place at the back. The front pieces were then added to the back piece and top stitched. The sleeves were then added at the shoulder seam and top stitched. The sleeve rib could then be added. The entire sleeve together with the side seam of the coat could then be sewn together and top stitched wherever appropriate. I could then try on my creation for the first time and I was horrified. I realized only at this point that the store had given me a slightly brighter and more saturated shade of green than the one I had ordered. So the whole ensemble looked a little bit too leprechaun-y for my taste. Also, the shoulder pads made everything even more ridiculous. I was also disappointed with the cording trims, since it didn't give the desired effect with a now brighter green. But I still find it all to be salvageable if I just made some changes, mainly removed the shoulder pads for a pair of green ones. I simply quilted a pair of new shoulder pieces using this clothesline quilting foot. The pieces were then added to the shoulders and I was a lot happier. Phew! To give the shoulders some more fullness, I then added a pair of shoulder pads. The hood could now be added. I had given the hood a little too much lining, so I gathered it all added back with a fold when no one would see it. The hood could then be added to the neckline. For the facing, I had misread the pattern and added a little too little interfacing. For a correct look, I should have added it to the whole front facing, but instead I just added it at the neckline. Oh well, lesson learned. The lining pieces then got a quick press and sewn together at the shoulders. The sleeves were then added, and yes, PS4 controllers make excellent fabric weights until they break, which luckily mine didn't, but anyway, you know, don't use it. And as before, the sleeves and side seams can now be sewn together. Just leave a little hole in one or both of the sleeves in preparation for upcoming steps. The facing pieces got a quick press and was then added to the lining. Quick tip, start sewing at the neckline to minimize the distortion of the fabric. And ta-da! You have a lining, or a handmade robe. I now realized that I needed a breast pocket, so I added it before I went any further. I also wanted an inner pocket in the lining, so it was added as well. With this step there was no real surprises, since I pretty much followed these same steps as the first pockets. I then needed a aglet to hang the coat on. I did this by press folding a piece of scrap fabric and then top stitched the strip using a double needle, not because it was necessary to use a double needle, but because I could. The aglet was then securely tacked to the neckline with a dense zigzag stitch. The lining could now be added to the coat at the neckline. I first pinned the sleeves in place before turning them inside out. The holes in the sleeve lining come into play here, since the lining now can be stitched in place without leaving any raw edges. The front seams are now supposed to receive a zipper, but since I had decided to not use a zipper, I just sewed everything together around the whole coat. Afterwards I could turn the coat right side out, and the coat is really looking great now. It's really come together. It is now very important to scrutinize the work to make sure that there aren't any major changes that need to be made. I didn't think I needed to change anything at this stage, so I continued by pressing the bottom fold and top stitched it in place. The buttons could then be added using a small button at the back in order to relieve the fabric and make it last longer. I made a hood string out of a scrap piece of red linen. I made a small tube of this piece and turned it inside out. A couple of end caps were then added for a more finished look. And I'm done! Yay! Well, almost. I needed to reposition a button, and I wanted the waist to be a little bit more form-fitted now when I think about it. But the shoulders worked as intended, and I'm really happy with that. I then marked the new button position and the point at the waist that I needed to take in the most. I then transferred this marker to the inside of the coat and then gave the stitch line some curvature with a French curve. I also locked the pocket pouches in place since it was a little too loose. The button was resewn and now the coat is finished! Yay! Totally out of fashion and totally unique. The only thing to do now is to take a cool thumbnail image. My name is Harold Cullen and I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you like this video, please click like and subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more of my upcoming project. And until next time, take care of one another. Bye!